In this video, we will get into the rest of the Artisan system and into the player-to-player trading systems to see how this will affect the Ashes of Creation economy. We still have a bit left to finish up with gathering before getting into processing and crafting. A very important consideration with gathering from a gold-making perspective is that every player can gather, process, and craft in the lowest tiers of the Artisan system. This does help offset the potential for the lowest tier materials to be overvalued, and it could make the lowest tier materials have very little value despite them always being needed. But it can also create an opportunity, and that opportunity is one that I've used in many different MMOs to make money. And dare I say, I don't think what I'm about to say is a common thing you see in the infinite gold making guides that exist for MMOs. And that is, the middle tier materials are never really considered a great place to make money. In Ashes, with the middle tier materials only being farmable by artisans who choose to become master gatherers, this creates an opportunity for these materials to potentially become a good opportunity for profit. The reason for this is there is just less attention paid to this area typically. Gatherers tend to spend less time gathering them once they learn the higher tier gathering. Crafters spend less time using them once they move to higher tiers. The higher tiers still require these materials, however, and with less people gathering them, this can create some imbalances. Oftentimes, the best money making is not in areas many are looking at. In-game gathering is often the focus of money-making guides, but oftentimes because of that focus, these markets become more efficient. And an efficient market is often one that is not as profitable. The profit is not just in the gathering, but potentially also in the marketplaces, whether it be player-to-player trading, player shops, player stalls, or in the nodes that have auction houses. Flipping these materials could present an opportunity. Moving on from gathering and moving into the rest of the Artisan system, processing is said to be the biggest bottleneck in the Artisan system. Processing some items could take a very long time, which is essentially a time gate. Other time gating might be present in the Artisan system, such as cooldowns on some recipes. This is a common thing in a lot of MMOs, and they haven't confirmed this yet, but I suspect we see some time gating. Either way, time gating again presents some natural supply bottlenecks and can be a steady income source for those who can process these time gated materials, especially if the processor has unlocked ways to increase their throughput of these items. So if you are considering processing, it might be wise to focus on these areas. Other areas processing has been profitable in past MMOs, as some materials when processed have a lot more value than when not processed. Some actually have less value after being processed. So tracking which materials give the best return for processing and then reselling those is often a good method of gold making. These advantages can ebb and flow quickly, so players will need to stay up to date on the latest trends. When doing these sort of strategies, I find it better to spread out my processing for gold income to multiple materials and not just one or two. This avoids overloading the materials market and causing you to lose money. And it is a good idea to spread out to multiple different strategies as well. Moving on to crafting, and for me it is hard to not envision a scenario where crafting does not become the best money-making profession in the long term. Early game it might not be, but late game I could absolutely see it. Especially with crafters making the best items and with rare recipes being a thing. Those crafters that can get leveled up early and get the critical recipes early can secure a huge economic advantage. There are a lot of bottlenecks that I think will limit the amount of crafters that are leveled up and provided high level materials, especially early on. Crafters are reliant on finding a processor that has a high enough processing to feed the crafter the correct materials to level. Processors are also reliant on gatherers that have a high enough gathering to provide the correct materials to level. They are also reliant on caravans to transport these materials to them. Gatherers have very little reliance, they just need to find a high enough node to give them XP and gather from it. Yes, one could argue they are reliant on crafters for gear to become more efficient at gathering, but in the end I am not sure this is enough of an offset. So this reliance and the fact that there is so much demand for the crafters that have the best recipes does cause me to believe that crafting might be the chosen profession for those that want to dominate economically long term. Personally, I have a huge draw towards being a gatherer. I want to be out in the world and exploring, not stuck in my freehold or node crafting. Processing could be a dark horse because I think it might be the one that has the least amount of players interested in it in this game, and that lack of interest could create opportunity. But Alpha 2 will help me ultimately determine which one I choose. Next, I want to talk about the player-to-player trading systems and how they will also have an effect on the pricing of items and materials in Ashes of Creation. In a lot of the modern theme park MMOs, access to a server-wide or even a global auction house that links multiple servers together is not uncommon. Guild Wars 2 probably has the most accessible and functional auction house in any MMO. You can open the Guild Wars 2 trading post and list items anywhere in the world. It has a lot of built-in functionality and an API that has allowed developers to make tools that show long-term price histories. It has buy and sell orders, and you can see the entire depth of the order book. This extremely easy accessibility creates an economy that is highly efficient at finding the correct and stable price for items. Yes, there are some slow shifts over time, but many items rarely have large price swings. The only time major price swings happen is usually around patches. All the trading posts being linked between all the servers in a region makes for a market that very often has a small spread between the buy and sell orders. Opportunities in terms of arbitrage and flipping of items for a profit on this type of auction house is much more challenging than an auction house that is only for one server, or better yet for only one region of one node of a server. But due to the sheer volume of orders that happened on the Guild Wars 2 auction house, there were certainly opportunities. They were just not as obvious as they were in other games. Ashes of Creation's auction house will not be nearly as accessible as the Guild Wars 2 auction house. You will have to physically have the items at the node location in order to list them on that auction house. You might be able to remotely bid in the vassal nodes of an economic metropolis, or in a linked metropolis or economic node, but you will still have to physically travel to this location to pick up any raw or processed materials. Finished items will be mailed. This ensures regional pricing differences. I also think it may become meta to get raw materials processed and crafted as soon as possible, as the risk of losing the materials is then gone, barring a player becoming corrupt. The effect that a server has linked their auction houses will drastically affect how the economies work on different servers. A server with no economic metropolis nodes will have a much less accessible market for players versus one that has 2 economic metropolis nodes with their auction houses linked, all their vassals linked, and other economic nodes also linked. The heavily linked auction house server will likely provide a much more stable economy and pricing. It could cause less opportunities for regional arbitrage, and players that want to flip items will have to be much more creative. In the next video, I will talk about how I flipped items in Guild Wars 2 and other auction houses. Some of the strategies might prove to be more effective on linked auction houses, and other strategies might work better on unlinked auction houses. I also hope the auction house has a lot of functionality like Guild Wars 2. Buy and sell orders are great for allowing patient players to set an order and get a better price for an item. A pure auction system with a buyout price is a much less functional system and favors the seller so much more. I hope that Ashes has a buy-sell order system and great functionality in terms of long-term price history. Ideally, it would be great if it was internal, and it sounds like external APIs might be pretty limited, so in that case, it would have to be internal. A buy-sell order system does tend to lend itself to more price stability in the game as well. In a game where there could be drastic economic swings, in a worst-case scenario, a massive amount of materials could be vaporized if a Stage 6 metropolis is destroyed. Having a buy-sell order auction house system instead of an auction style with buyouts might be warranted for the more stable economy. I've always preferred a buy-sell order system for auction house flipping despite the smaller profit margins that exist. Buy orders make it easier to be patient and buy the natural downswings in prices, and sell orders allow you to sell the natural peaks in price. Outside the auction houses, there are multiple other player-to-player trading methods. Player stalls and shops, and just regular player-to-player trade. These will be even less efficient as some players will not know the going rates for some items, so this could present another arbitrage opportunity. And this is where I will end this video. This sets us up for the final video where I will list all of the methods I have used to make gold in previous MMOs and discuss whether each of these methods could work in this MMO. And I will discuss what I think will be the best gold making methods overall in Ashes, both in the early game and the late game. I have already said that I think crafting could definitely be the best choice for gold making of the 3 artisan professions in the long term. But of course, until we get into the game, that is highly speculative. If you liked the video, consider subscribing, and with that, I will see you in the next video.